Do you feel like your family just kind of put all their emotional baggage on you and you just had to spend most of your life trying to unpack that and trying to differentiate between what is your desires and your own neurotic tendencies and just what you inherited from your family? Well, today we're going to talk about it. We're going to be diving into that and lots more with our guest, Dr. Paulomi Campbell. Dr. Campbell is a holistic psychologist based in Charlotte, North Carolina. She received her Ph.D. in counseling psychology from the University of Buffalo in 2007. Since then, she served as a psychologist at Levine Cancer Institute and Columbia St. Mary's, as well as being an assistant professor at both Vanderbilt University Medical Center and Marquette University. Currently, she is the founder of Inara Therapy and Wellness, where she has taken her experiences over the past 15 years in the healthcare field to offer a unique form of holistic psychotherapy, which utilizes both traditional and cutting-edge non-traditional therapies to help clients view themselves with compassion rather than judgment, and to create a fuller integration between the body and the mind. Some of the topics that we dove into today are expectations, identity, and repairing family relationships, empathy, emotional isolation, repression, and vulnerability, the science-practice gap, neuroplasticity, self-work, and toxic relationships, and how one keeps themselves grounded as a therapist, which I found pretty insightful, and lots more. So all that said, I bring you the great and compassionate Dr. Paulomi Campbell. What made you want to start going on podcasts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm always trying to grow and get out of my comfort zone. So I was doing some coaching with somebody and they'd mentioned this, that you could try doing podcasts. I mean, they just gave me some ideas on how to put myself out there, just because I am going on a new sort of opening my own practice and taking this new sort of shift in how I'm practicing. So they just thought that it's a good way for you to talk about what you're doing and then also get connected with what you're doing, and also just to put yourself out there and just a fun thing, like a different thing to do.
Yeah.
So I just, it doesn't feel like I'm going out and talking to a bunch of people because I can't see the people. So that would be a lot more nerve wracking for me than this is. Like this
Yeah.
feels more intimate, and then I can, I don't know who's going to listen to it, but at least it feels like I'm having a conversation with you. So
Yeah.
it feels, that feels good.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't really like public speaking very much when I'm in
Yeah.
front of a bunch of people. I start getting overwhelmed because like I'm
Right.
naturally everyone has a superpower and mine is intuition and like
Mm-hmm.
reading people. So I'm
Yeah.
just sitting there and I'm like every single person, like I'm kind of reading all their little mannerisms and like and I'm just
Right.
like it's overload. I've done a couple, decently sized conferences and it's just really overwhelming. Yet I can
Yeah.
do like I've taught a couple classes where there's, a good amount of founders and stuff like that. And I know they're all watching, but it doesn't bother me,
Yeah.
doing it
Yeah.
digitally. I don't know. It's just very
Yeah.
different because I don't
It
have to
is.
focus as much on other people. I can just be present. But
Yeah. That's, I think that's a good, I think that's exactly how I feel, is that I can't, I'm like the same thing into it, like, very much connected to intuition. And so I'm trying to read people and it gets overwhelming, just like you said.
it is. It's very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think podcasts are amazing for that, though. I mean, particularly like with you, doing counseling and like therapy and like basically in a lot of ways being a coach with people.
Yeah.
That's something that, it's just like that's something that you can't really advertise. Like a
Right.
lot of people do, but it comes off really forced and really
Uh-huh.
kind of insincere. And so I feel like it's just one of those things. I mean, for me, like in the business world, I do a lot of, consulting and advising, and I kind of act like a coach. I don't call myself a coach, but I guess I kind of do a lot of the time. But
Mm.
that's not something that, that's almost like it has to be a referral or you have
Yeah.
to like meet the person. You have to hear them on a podcast. I'd be like, oh, I want to work with Josh,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. You can't, it's just, I don't know. I've never liked the idea of like advertising, like I'm a
Yeah.
consultant or a coach. It just feels wrong almost. I don't know.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah.
that's exactly how I feel, like 100%. Like that's why I thought these ways feels more aligned with who I am.
Hmm.
And I don't feel like I'm hustling and all the things. That's just not who I am. And so I'm more about just allowing things to come. And I feel like this is just me being me. And if people like it, then great. If,
Yeah.
if, because it really in a counseling situation or therapy or, coaching, it's really about the relationship between the two. So if you don't feel that connection, it's just, that's where when you feel seen and you feel heard, it's not
Yeah.
going to go anywhere. You're not going to be able to do the work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that, people hearing this and saying, oh, this resonates with me and I can see myself working with this person, that feels much more genuine
Mm-hmm.
than going on and saying, hey, look what I can offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's what's been like the biggest struggle for you, kind of, starting your own business and doing this independently?
Yeah, it's just that, doing this independently. I have never done this before, and it's just I'm very comfortable with, the work in terms of working with people. It's the other side of getting my name out there, and the business side of having a business is
Mm-hmm.
where it's not my strengths. I don't like it. I don't like what you have, in terms of the traditional ways of running a business. It's just not who I am, and so so that's the struggle that I've had, and why it's taken me, so being more creative with myself in terms of how am I going to put myself out there, and how
Yeah.
am I going to get myself known, and how am I going to attract the people that I feel will benefit from, my style of therapy, and so that's been the struggle for me.
Yeah. How would you define your kind of flavor of therapy?
So I was just thinking about that. I think, I'm calling it holistic psychology, holistic psychotherapy,
Yeah.
uh, but it's truly a spiritual psychology. Just really learning to sort of connect deeper within yourself, finding out who you really are, because that's the source of everything. I mean, that's, when you're connected more with yourself, everything else in your life you can just enjoy and it flows,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not required in order for you to feel complete.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this really search for finding that completeness within yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the overview of how I see, the sort of suffering that we go through is because we have this disconnection with who we are.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, philosophically, I guess that's some of the basis. And then more practically, it's how do you get connected to yourself? And that's the first thing, is that you're taking care of yourself, your mind, body, and spirit. Because if you're not taking care, then you don't have the facilities to get connected.
Yeah.
So on practical, it's what can you do daily, commitments to yourself in order to achieve this sort of deeper connection with who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it's not something that I learned in my degree, my PhD program. It's just sort of what's evolved after working with clients, and then my own personal experience too, my own personal journey.
Yeah.
And and my background is working with cancer patients, where that's where I started to really see this connection between mind, body, and spirit, and what people are really searching for, and what is the cause for illness, and not only mental illness, but physical health
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of my what I've sort of put out there as my practice, and I've wanted to do this for a long time. And I working with in a cancer setting, I was able to sort of practice the way that I believed in, and what I felt really really solidified the relationship between me and the patient, like that I had done, but I wasn't really in the environment that sort of supported that. So I felt kind of on my own, and I felt kind of that I was kind of out there, and there was a really big push to diagnose and pathologize symptoms, and I would do that just because I had to check off the box, but it's not what I really believe. It didn't guide me in what I was doing with the patient.
Yeah.
It didn't guide our therapy session. So yeah, so that's why I thought, I just want to, this is a good time for me to go on my own. The pandemic hit. I was working at a cancer center, and I have two little kids at home, and I couldn't do therapy from home and take care of my kids in the school and all that stuff. So I decided that I'm going to quit. And then I just started writing, and I started developing my website. And I just thought this is a good time for me to go off on my own. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult with the healthcare system right now. I mean, this what you're telling me, I've heard like in many different ways, many times before, and it's just a reoccurring theme. I mean, even me, like I'm dealing with an autoimmune issue right now, and like I've been to every single specialist around here, and I've
Mhm.
just recently got referred to the Cleveland Clinic, and they have a functional medicine department.
Mm.
And, I'm sitting there talking with them, and everything they're telling me is completely like the opposite of what most of the specialists have been seeing to, but it makes so much intuitive sense. Like, let's
Yeah.
look at the root problem
Right.
of your issues. They're asking me questions, like, were you C-section or were you natural birth, like all these other
Mm-hmm.
things. And they're going back, how many antibiotics you've been on, all these other things. And they're looking back, whereas all the other doctors I've been to is just, what medications have you been on? What procedures
Yeah.
have you had? I mean, it's very two-dimensional. And I feel
Yeah.
like it's the same thing in a lot of ways with mental health.
It
I
is.
mean, I
Yeah.
I have ADHD, bipolar 2, and generalized anxiety disorder. So I've been to a lot of people, and even my psychiatrist now, who I like him and he's a cool guy, but
Mm-hmm.
even him, a lot of the time, it's very, okay, well, let's try this, let's try that. And he doesn't really ask me much about lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's, that's, that's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I feel like that's in every shape and form. And I know so many people that are struggling with very severe mental health issues, and then they go to a therapist, and it's just like they don't do anything for them. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it's got to be really difficult being in that industry, and just feeling kind of like you're alone in an island.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, what's
Yeah.
that been like for you? Like that struggle of just feeling, yeah, like you're that you're kind of put in a box, and it's hard for you to get outside of it.
Yeah. It's I've always felt outside of the box, and so I've become more used to it. Growing up, I'm from in India. I was born in India, but I was raised in from Michigan.
Hmm.
So, and I just was always different, and as a child, that was hard to navigate. But, as
Yeah.
I've gotten older, I can see that I've always thought outside the box, and I've just been outside the box. I haven't gone into the what was expected of me, which was to become a doctor, medical doctor.
Hmm.
And I'm surrounded by medical doctors and surrounded by this very linear way of thinking that if there's a symptom, then you fix it. And I've always said, but wait, what's really going on? What's the person's story? What's the background? Like that's where my mind goes. And so I've always felt that way. It's just only recently that I've sort of come into my own, and I've really just you know, there's still been this sort of wanting this community of people that think the way that I do. That's still in me,
Yeah.
but more so instead of sort of fighting for it and begging for it and needing it. I've really tried to work on just allowing it to happen, because I know that there's a significant amount of people now that sort of want this kind of way of not only getting help in their own life, but also want to practice this way too. Like functional medicine and integrative medicine, and even like holistic psychology and these sort of energy healing. All these things are becoming more mainstream. So I don't feel like it's as much of a I'm the only one that's thinking this way. So
Yeah.
that feels good, but I still don't have that. I don't have that sort of immediate community that I know that I can access right now. That's
Yeah.
still something that I'm searching for. And so at times it is lonely, and it's especially with the people in my immediate family who are all medical doctors. And when I get together with them, it's the talk is just so different than what I would normally what energizes me. It's that doesn't energize them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I've just, luckily now I'm not, I'm an adult. I've done a lot of work on myself. So I, I'm less likely to take it personally and feel like, oh, why don't they get me? It's more like that's just how they are, and I'm different, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
But I imagine it was a long journey to get to there.
oh
So
yeah,
so what
it's
was that
still,
like? What was that like growing up in that setting? I mean, God, that's a lot. Like
yeah.
you've already got I mean, my partner is of Indian descent as well, and like that whole
Mm,
side of her family is very different. So like it's
mm-hmm.
just like there's definitely expectations, and things are very kind of two-dimensional in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
yeah,
So it's like what so you have that side of things, and then you've got the other, growing up and with a family of doctors as well, and having those expectations of what is expected of you, and then you're growing up in Michigan, and you have that I mean, that's a lot. That's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah. It is. It's
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you validating that, because that's that's the, because I think that for Indian people, we're considered the model minority, where we came to this country, we excel, we, contribute a lot, and we, that's just the impression of people from Asian countries coming to this country. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's the reason why parents came too, is because they wanted, better opportunities for their kids, what they didn't get. So, but I just was different. I mean, especially with my mom is also a physician. She's extremely, hardworking. She's, there's a lot of good qualities about her. It's, but, in terms of me coming along, I was just so different from her. And I still am, I'm
Yeah.
just much more of a, laid back, easygoing. And my strengths are this, picking up on people's feelings and that's what interests me, their stories, and really
Yeah.
hearing them and seeing them. And that's something that she never understood or got. Not that she's not able to do it, but she just didn't see that becoming something that I could do with my life. For her, I mean, she told me growing up, don't ever become a psychologist, because in her mind it was for, it was for crazy people. Um,
Yeah.
so that was a strong message growing up, that the only thing that you can be considered successful is if you're a doctor, a medical doctor, or engineer, something that's more um, sort of, mainstream, that you go into school, you get a degree, you're going to guarantee get a job. It's very linear. It's like taking risks is not what you do in that department, or in
Yeah.
anything, actually. It's like you have to follow this very linear way of living, which is you get to school, you don't have any other distractions, you just get your degree, you go on for postgraduate, whatever, and then you can think about marriage and kids. And it's just, you have to follow that line.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not how my life went at all. And so, but I think that it taught my mom a lot too. It taught her that, she can't control everything, because that's her thing, is that she was very determined growing up in India. Like, she came from, poverty. Her parents didn't have much money. Her mom was treated very poorly by her um, in-laws. And so her whole goal was that I will never put myself in that situation ever. Like, I would never be treated that way. And so her ticket out was to get an education.
Yeah.
So she just excelled, and that was her whole thing. So for me, seeing me not do that was terrifying for her, because she's like, what is this? What is she going to become? Nothing. Like, somebody's, she's going to be dependent on a man, and, or what, she's not going to be able to take care of herself. And so that was her whole drive, is that I have to control this. I have to get her to do, to get this education so that she's free and can take care of herself.
Yeah. That's gotta
So,
be difficult. I mean, if you think about it from her perspective, like she saw what poverty was like and
mm-hmm,
struggling,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and, she doesn't want that for you, which is a very, it's a very loving act of
Yeah.
love. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, you're like, that kind of removes a lot of agency from you.
Mhm.
Like you are not her, and maybe you want to go in a different direction. But then
Yeah.
she probably, like many of the people that I've known that are like that, I might be projecting, but I imagine that she's like, okay, well, you grew up here in Michigan, you didn't get to see what I saw,
Mhm.
so I understand your perspective, but I know what it's like. You don't have that experience. I
Yeah.
shielded you from that,
Mhm.
so you don't know, like, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
But also, she doesn't know what she doesn't know.
Mhm.
So it's just like, that's just a weird thing. Like, as a
Yeah.
mother, like, I have to imagine that's a heavy weight. It comes from good intentions, but also,
Mhm.
again, like, you go down that path where I've heard it so many times before. People like saying that their parents are just like, you got to do this, and like,
Mhm.
I don't have kids, but I could not imagine having a child and being like, I mean, even my sister, I kind of partially raised her. We have a
Mhm.
pretty big age gap, and
Mhm.
I'm always telling her, like, do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
As long as you're
Yeah.
happy and you're making enough money where you're not struggling, do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I don't understand that total scarcity mindset.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
again, that's also perhaps comes from a place of privilege.
That's what yeah. That's
Yeah.
exactly, like, it's, for her it was just, it was scarcity. It's that if I don't, then I'm going to be in this situation. And that she didn't want that for me. So, like, as I grew into my, this is just maybe like 10 years is that I've been able to see her perspective. It was a lot of anger towards my mother,
Sure.
and now I can see where this comes from, and I can admire how determined she is and how strong she, like, I mean, there's a lot of qualities about her that I completely admire, and we're very close.
Yeah.
And she's come to appreciate who I am too, but it's been a long journey of that, because there was a lot of me rebelling, fighting against her, hating her, all sorts of things, lying. I mean, you name it, I did it. And so, our relationship was very volatile for a long time. And there's a lot of anger and just not seeing her as on my side. And the end result was that I was the one that was suffering. Like I didn't find my direction. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I was just too busy rebelling all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this has been a long journey of like sort of coming into my own, and I'm still, there's still lots of stuff that comes up for me, lots of triggers,
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
wounds that I still, continue to work on with myself. Because there's, it's just been it's been an interesting ride for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the body keeps a score. It's like
yeah.
you don't just get over
Oh yeah.
trauma. I
No.
mean, that's what it sounds like with your mom. I mean, she dealt with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trauma, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
now that you guys are in the United States, and the quality of there's a lot of safety nets here, and the
Yeah.
quality of life is very different. But she's
Mm-hmm.
still caught in those loops. That
Yeah.
mindset. Her body's still
Exactly.
like, I don't want that, but
Yeah.
it's it gets hard. And what was the changing point for you? Because I mean, I understand, like, my dad was an alcoholic growing up, and he and I didn't have the best relationship. It wasn't the worst, but it certainly wasn't the best, and now we have a great relationship. But that took place over, god, 15-20 years, basically. Like, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it was it was a slow burn process, and there was some very dramatic little side adventures along the way. But what was the catalyst, I guess, if you had to like look back in retrospect to be like, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
where things started to change?
Well, so, I guess going back, college, I'm so desperate to just get out of my house and away from my parents and just to
Yeah.
be on my own. And so I got into Kalamazoo College, and it started in high school was when um, eighth grade is when things started to become difficult with me with school. Like I was pretty much cruising through school until then. And then I
Yeah.
had my first geometry class, and I think I got a C or a C, something like that. And that I had never gotten that before. And I was terrified to tell my mom that that I'd gotten a C. And so back then it was just, I don't even know how this happened, but it was on a paper, and it was just, I mean, it was something that I could change the grade. So I changed my grade, and I changed it to an A just so that because my mentality was that I'm not going to work harder. I want to go have fun. I don't care about geometry. And I
Yeah.
knew that I wouldn't be able to do what I wanted to do if I had gotten this kind of grade. And so I just changed my grade and gave it to her. So that was like the pattern.
Mm.
And high school, I graduated, and I had gotten into Kalamazoo College. Like I had done decent enough. And Kalamazoo College is a private university, or and it's pretty difficult to get into. Somehow I
Yeah.
got in, but I remember my senior year, they had told me that my grades were dropping, and so they were going to put me on some conditional thing for my college. Like I still could go, but they were going to watch how I did. Well, it ends up I failed out of Kalamazoo College. I came back, and I went to University of Michigan Flint, and I got my grades up only so that I could go to Ann Arbor where all my friends were.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I failed out of University of Michigan Ann Arbor. I came back to Flint. I finally graduated, and then I decided I'm going to pack my car up and move to DC. I just wanted to get out, and so that's when I, got together with some friends that I had. And long story short, I got married to somebody that I was dating, and I mean, that whole thing was just, I mean, it feels like a different person, but
Mm.
that's what, I got married, not really wanting to get married. I just wanted to say, so he was an Indian guy. I thought, okay, I'll get married, and then I'll be accepted in my community. My parents will be happy that I'm, at least I'm going in some direction that they wanted me to go into. And my community that I grew up in will also think, oh, look, Paulomi's getting married. Cause I'd be the first in my, immediate group of friends that got married. And so it wasn't even that this guy's right. Like it wasn't anything that we should sort of look at when we want to get married. It was just to like check off a box.
Yeah, it was like a business decision almost.
Yeah. It was. So anyways, that ended in 4 months. And that's
Yeah.
when who picked me up was my parents, my mom. They still said, that's okay. You made a mistake. You can come help me. They didn't, because what could have happened is, especially like in Indian communities, is divorce is very much looked down upon. It still is, but they could have easily said, you're on your own. We don't care. But they brought me in. They said, that's okay. We're still here for you. And I think that was such a pivotal moment for me. Because during that marriage, my ex-husband was very much insulting my parents and expecting all these things, kind of like a dowry situation that happens in India. Wanting all these things, just very disrespectful. And that whole experience that I had with him, it's one thing me disrespecting my parents when somebody else did, and going through all that, and then them still saying we support you. That was a very much of a shifting point. That's what changed my whole course of my life. And that's when my healing journey, I think, began, is that I realized that, like, they aren't my enemies. They just want me to have some direction. They just didn't know how to support me in finding my direction. And so and I needed that experience to just sort of wake me up and kind of get me to what do I want to do with my life? Like, who am I? Because I was so busy just trying to be somebody, or trying not to be somebody that they expected of me and the community expected of me. And that experience, somehow I was like, I got to figure out what I want to do. Like, I don't want to be dependent on somebody else either. So even though it was painful for me, painful for my parents. It was a big eye-opening experience for me. And that shifted our relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I identify with that. I had a similar experience where I went down to Cincinnati. I'm in Dayton, Ohio, so not too far from you. You're still in Michigan, right?
No. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, not too far from where you grew up. And
right.
I moved down to Cincinnati, about an hour south of Dayton, and moved down there with my first girlfriend, and first serious girlfriend, I should say. And like that was very traumatic. Very, very traumatic. It was a very toxic relationship. And then I came back, and me and my dad started to kind of patch things up, and it was similar. It was just like, it was just like any sort of issues that we had, he put aside, and he just, was like, hey, you're my son. I'm going to be here for you. And I felt okay. I truly knew that, he loved me in that moment. And not that I really questioned it before, but it was just different. It was like shedding all those layers of expectations or anything. You just kind of shed all that, and you're able to actually like connect as, family, and as like two human beings. And then, so I understand that. It's interesting though that like you were, these kind of expectations and these kind of societal norms were like such a pressure on you, and they influenced you so much, but then also you were rebelling at the same time. So it definitely seems like a push and pull internally, like this conflict. Like you wanted to break free, but you felt like there was this like bondage almost that you couldn't get tethered to it. You couldn't get away.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like I wanted to be like them, but then I knew I wasn't like them. And it was this constant, like you said, push and pull. And I didn't have the guidance or support to know how to navigate that at all. And so I was just kind of in my own little world trying to figure this out. And I just kept, running after people and trying to, sort of take care of this angst that I felt just by, going to the next, just wanting distractions all the time, and it was mainly for me, it was just being with my friends. I mean, so-called friends, but I never really discussed or talked about how I was feeling. It was just, I wanted to be the life of the party, and I wanted people to like me. And so I would just be fun and happy. And, that's all. I never really could talk about what was really going on, because we had to, like, on top of that, we had to hide all the, anything that's not positive. We had to hide that. You don't discuss your family issues or your own personal struggles with anybody. So nobody knew what I was going through, and I didn't know where to turn to either.
Was that reinforced by your social group, or was that just from your family and then you kind of brought that along with you?
I think it's both. I grew up in we have like 5 families that I grew up with that were very close. And I mean, close in the sense that it became family. I would say close in the sense that we were able to be vulnerable with each other. But my parents came from India. They didn't have family here. And so that became their support system. But from very young age, it was always said that we don't talk about anything outside of our family. And even within our family, it's not like we could really talk. It was, it was very much, if you got upset, you just blurted out whatever. It's not like we were actually processing things and, you know, um, trying to find sort of, be really empathetic and listening to people. It was just yelling and screaming if we were upset about something.
Yeah.
So yeah, so but that part of it had to be hidden from everybody else. So, I'd have like blowout fights with my mom, but then I'd go out and pretend like nothing happened.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a lot of
So,
repression.
mhm.
What do you think that stems from? Because like there's definitely a lot of, and I'm not super well versed, but just the people that I know in my life, it just seems like in India, and then also like some of the South Asian countries, it's just prevalent with this kind of suppression of a lack of vulnerability. Like vulnerability is a weakness.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
is a vulnerability. Like it is a vulnerability to you as a human being to be vulnerable, and
Yeah.
like that is an odd thing. It's like everything is like a strategic decision almost,
Mhm, mhm.
and it's just I don't know. It really kind of desaturates the whole energy of life, like the user experience of life, if you will. The quality of
Mhm,
life is just kind of I don't know. It's just very false, and
mhm,
and there's a different flavor of that, I think, in America for sure. I mean, the people, chasing the cars and the money and whatever, and in the South, there's like Southern hospitality.
mhm,
People are kind of
mhm.
fakely nice and
Yeah.
whatever. A lot of amazing people in the South, but that's definitely a thing. And
Mhm.
so I don't know. I mean, I grew up in the Rust Belt, similar to you, where people are just in general, as a whole, a lot more blunt.
Yeah.
Um, not everybody, but I would say compared to a lot of other places in the country.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, where do you think that stems from? Is it just survival, like that scarcity, or?
I think it's survival. I think this is being able to process your emotions, and that comes from a place of privilege, I think. And I think from my parents, it's that if you do that, then you can't survive. Like, you have to just move on. You can't feel things, and you can't get stuck in feeling sorry for yourself or feeling sad or whatever the these sort of emotions that they label is, that then you're feeling sorry for yourself, and you
Mhm.
won't you won't get out of it, and you'll stay stuck in poverty. You'll stay stuck in this sort of way of living. And so for my mom, I mean, she saw a lot of things that were pretty traumatic, growing up. And it was just like, just keep studying and get out of this. And so, there was never a, a teaching moment or a place to be allowed to process feelings. Like, she doesn't even know what that means.
Huh.
Even to this day, it's not that, oh, you feel sad. Like, let's really feel how you feel. That's like so foreign. And it's foreign to a lot of people, but especially with, my parents and that sort of generation. I just think it's that you just buckle down and you get it done. And, there's no time to feel.
Yeah.
And it's not considered a superpower at all.
Yeah, that's how much of that do you think is just baseline genetics and you just happen to be a variable versus societal kind of constructs or conditioning? Because, I use the Myers-Briggs as a shorthand. I don't
Mhm.
think it's an exact science or whatever, but like the reason why I like the Myers-Briggs is very, very quickly you can get an idea of what's the 80-20 of how somebody interfaces with somebody else.
Mhm.
So I always am just when I meet somebody, an example I often give is like, let's say you meet somebody at a bar and they're just really kind of standoffish. It's like maybe they're just an introvert,
Mhm.
maybe
Mhm.
they're kind of shy and maybe they're not ignoring you because they're a dick or something. It's just
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
like they're shy and they don't know how to open up and whatever. Because we often have so much friction and connecting with people. So, but there are people that just are not emotional. They just don't process emotions in the same way. Me, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
highly emotional person, but I also
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of trauma, so I repress
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an intentional thing; it's just automatic, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to learn how to get myself out of it. But it's like so. I always wonder in these circumstances, like how much of it is nature versus nurture. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's both. I mean, I think that yes, we genetically come with, certain predisposition, but I do think our environment really does. I mean, if you're not allowed to feel things, and that's how you're sort of conditioned, that's just, that's what you learn to do as you grow older. So, if you come wired differently and you're in that environment, it's still, that's what I think happened to me, is that
Yeah,
I am wired differently.
yeah,
I am wired to be a feeler. Like I feel a lot,
yeah,
and very emotional, and very sensitive. And so it can come off as feeling, in these kind of environments where it's very, sort of black and white, it can really feel like you're weak. Uh, you're not strong if you feel too much. So I think you can really suppress that. But I think there's only a certain point, but it comes out in other ways. And
yeah,
that's, so I think that yes, we are wired in certain ways, but I also, I think, not that it's an exact answer, but I think it is both nature and nurture.
yeah,
But I do
and
think, yeah, I do think that people can learn if they want to. Like, I don't think you're destined to be this way. I think anybody can learn to be more in touch with their emotions. It may not be natural for you, it may not be comfortable for you, but you can learn.
yeah. That's a hard process, though. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
neuroplasticity is something that is kind of agnostic. I think most of the time when we hear about neuroplasticity, it's kind of framed as this positive thing. You get to learn a new language, you can recondition things, you can do all this other stuff. But what I've been learning recently with I've been having to dive into the limbic system with some of the stuff
Yeah.
I've been dealing with. It's like that also can calcify really negative aspects as well. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like so the whole neurons that fire together wire together. So it's like if you're young and you're conditioned to this over time, it just kind of continues to calcify and you have more and
Mm-hmm.
more layers. And
Mm-hmm.
as you get older, it's like, I mean, I think that's where the whole adage, like, you can't teach a dog new tricks. Like it just gets really hard to
It
get out
does.
of those patterns. And
Yeah.
what have you found to be the most effective to kind of remove some of those layers of calcification and be able to be in a place where you can begin to kind of uh, get outside of those patterns or those loops?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's why I think that, having that, uh, therapy or like some place where you're held accountable, and
Yeah,
that you are, um, that you make, sort of how you described it as, removing these sort of calcifications, is that you have a place where you're held accountable and you're able to make those commitments to yourself, like small commitments every day. Um, and sort of not that your goal is just to get to know yourself, and get to know your patterns. That this is the thing. Like we're naturally good to go towards what we're comfortable with. I mean,
mm,
that's just, what the body and mind likes to stay in the comfort zone. And so, even just reaching out for help and saying, I need some help. I need some help into in order how to learn to treat myself differently, or have a different relationship with my thoughts. Like all those things are really difficult, and we do need support around them. And so I think that's the first thing, is that recognizing that you do want to change. You want to feel better. You want to, not follow these same patterns that you've kind of grown up with, and
yeah,
recognizing that, and seeking that kind of support that you need. And that support is different for everybody. Finding somebody that you really feel gets you and can connects with you, and like I said before, like really sees and hears you, and validates what you've been through. Because I think that, in it, like just seeing and hearing someone and understanding their, and validating their story, just calms the nervous system down, where they can be more in touch with their intuition, and
yeah,
see that, like, no, I can make these small changes, and not all at once, because that's too overwhelming, and the body mind is going to sabotage you because you can't do all of it at once. But these small changes, and then that confidence comes that I can do this, and I have the support, and I have somebody with me that sees and hears me and supports me in what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why I've been wanting to do this podcast and want to
Mm-hmm.
continue doing it, is being able to have a platform where people like yourself can share those stories. And it's like, for me, I want to do that myself. Like, I try to be as vulnerable as possible, because like I wish I had that.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had that when I was younger, and even
Yeah.
now, like I try to find people that are going to talk about, like, I struggle on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody struggles. I
Yeah.
haven't met a single human being that doesn't struggle in some way. Like, I had a dude on recently, Oliver, who's a monk. Like, he's been, just meditating for 20 years pretty much all day. And like, he's probably one of the closest people that I've met to someone who doesn't struggle. But even he's like, sometimes I got to get back on the horse. And, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, I think that's so important to hear those stories, and somebody like yourself, who it's just like, you have a very unique perspective on the world, but somebody else has gone through something somewhat similar, and they're like, oh, that's me. I identify with that.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
powerful. And
Yeah, I think
it's,
so too.
I think with the, like, even around here, like in the Rust Belt, it's like the opioid epidemic. I think a lot of it is just a lack of community and a lack of
Mm-hmm.
being seen, like that escapism you were talking about,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
I
know?
think being seen and heard is why we have such not feeling that, not feeling like somebody truly sees you for who you are and not, and can be there. I think that's what we're all craving so much. And with somebody, but even just ourselves, really being able to see and hear ourselves, giving us that space, because now we're just such a society that just goes, 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 and everything is, available at you just Google it and you get it.
Yeah.
So it's just such an instant gratification. And so this is, this is slowing down, and this is connecting with yourself. And that's just not very supported in our life, in the way that we live our lives.
Yeah.
So, but that's what we desperately need. That's what we're
Yeah.
really searching for. So, finding somebody where you're forced to sit down and you're forced to look at your life, and you're forced to, talk about you, and get to the points where you can be truly vulnerable. I think it's life changing.
Yeah. What are the commonalities you see in people who kind of refuse help? Like, they're in enough pain where they realize that this is not sustainable and is not doing them any service. There are people that are just caught in this. They're just caught in the rat race, or they're just caught in the matrix, and like they're probably never gonna get out. Like,
Yeah.
they kind of even lack self-awareness of why they're in pain. Those people are just kind of beyond saving,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Like,
Yeah.
but the people that are kind of self-aware, but then they continue to refuse to start removing those layers. Like, what is there any commonalities you see there?
That I think that the commonalities I see is I think that they're looking for somebody else to fix them or something else to fix
Mm,
them. And so, when I meet with somebody and I tell them that I'm just their guide, not just, but I'm their guide, helping them to, be their own, that I believe that they're their healer, that they know that they through this process they're going to know themselves, better than anybody else can know them, and so they know what they need in order to heal. And sometimes people just shut down. They're just like,
mm,
okay, well, she's not going to take care of this. I have to do the work.
yeah,
And so that's my experience, is that they want something else outside of them, to fix their problems. And so that's when I'm just, that's when I try to encourage them to see that they have all the answers within them. What they really want is right inside of them. And that sometimes is just, it's like this blank stare. And okay, I thought I was going to get, CBT, where I'd have 8 weeks of this and you change my thoughts, and I'd be fine.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I wish it was that simple, but it's just not. It
yeah,
takes daily work, and it takes making these commitments, and it takes getting to know yourself, and it takes you realizing that you have everything within yourself. It's just all clouded from, the traumas you've been through, and that there's that disconnect. And so what we're here for is to guide you back to yourself
yeah.
and what you need.
It's one of the reasons why I'm very hopeful for like psychedelic therapy, psilocybin and MDMA, because
Yeah.
I don't think that those are cure-alls. It's not a panacea, but what I do see it as is maybe it can remove enough of that calcification to get them to the point where they're like, okay, wow, I see, I know enough now to be able to see that like I'm the problem and I need to fix this, and then they can start doing the deep work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I am hopeful for that. I think some
Yeah.
people in that space are a little they do think it's like a, you hit the button and you go through this thing and you come out and you're a different person. And I mean, you might be a different person, but it doesn't mean all your problems are solved.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
have seen some people that have done that, and they come back and they're very aware of
Mm-hmm.
what they need to work on, and I think that's really promising.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's that what you said, the awareness. I think it
Yeah,
helps because that's what we need to in order to make changes is that you're just even aware of how your mind works, the thoughts that you have, your behaviors. So that light of awareness is key. So, if that's and I think that's why that line, psychedelics is a hopeful thing for me too, because I think there's just so much trauma that it blocks us from being aware.
yeah.
We're sort of so much in our ego, reacting all the time. And so if that helps to bring that awareness for people that, oh, look at, I have some distance between my thoughts and my behaviors and I can watch them now. That awareness can help you to just not react to every single thought and feeling that comes up. So yeah, I think it's a promising field too.
What is there on that note? Like, is there any commonalities that you see? So, like triggers that kind of create that awareness, like plant that seed where they're like, oh, I got like for you, it was definitely the kind of dissolution of your marriage and having that reconnection with your parents, and then that kind of spawned this whole alternative path. And I'm sure with some people, it's having like a psychedelic experience or something, or it's having some sort of loss or death in their life or something. But still, I mean, outside of those kind of major, do you see any commonalities that are more subtle that seem to be triggers, and people are like, oh, I need to work on myself? Because that's if that's something that isn't instilled in you, like your family is like, hey, you need to go to therapy or whatever. That's kind of a difficult, that seems almost like taboo in a lot of ways. Like people are, and I don't view it this way at all, and I don't even really understand it. I mean, I understand it from the outside, but I have no emotional understanding of it. Is like people that just see it as a weakness to go to therapy or something. Even some people that I know that I feel like are pretty self-aware and very successful, even they view it as a weakness, which is very confusing to me because I'm like,
Yeah.
if you ran a business, as many of these people do, you would hire a consultant to advise you in areas that you lack, expertise in, subject matter expertise. So why would you not do that with your life?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. But is there any
Yeah.
sort of like commonalities of people that do seem to seek out help?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, it is a lot of times, repetitive, whether it's, unhealthy relationships, toxic relationships. From my experience, it can, range from hitting rock bottom where you kind of, have you know, a death or a loss or a cancer diagnosis. That's what I was working with cancer patients. And so that's why I just so enjoyed working with them because the depth that they went to after experiencing something that they didn't expect happen to them was incredible. It's like they really wanted to get into their patterns and behaviors and take responsibility for their life.
Hmm.
So from my experience, it's, it could be from that, but it's something that they didn't expect happen to them, triggers them to think, okay, I can't keep blaming, I can't keep playing the victim. I got to take responsibility here. I got to see what's going on. So it's something that they didn't expect to happen as a catalyst to seek help and to seek the answer, seek deeper answers. That it's not about just getting into another relationship or getting into another job, or it's not just something outside of me. I've got to step back and do some analysis here and see what's going on. So that's been my experience. And I know it's very lucky if you are raised in a family where doing this sort of self work or is part of what you just do. Like you go to see a medical doctor. It's just part of what you do. That's very lucky. But from my experience, it's that in my own experience, it's that just something keeps happening and you don't understand it, but you keep getting heartbroken or, and then you say, wait a minute here, I've got to look at what's going on. I've got to see this pattern. And I think that's a real blessing if you can get to that point, that you
Yeah.
can see suffering as a catalyst to change, to really living a kind of life that you want to live.
Yeah.
And you're right.
What?
Some people just don't in this lifetime. They just don't. They just keep going and they just keep, looking outwards and not wanting to go inward.
Yeah, there's a couple people that I've had in my life recently that are significantly older than me, and I've just kind of accepted that they're a lost cause.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have enough conversations with them, and they're just stuck in these loops.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you make them aware of those loops,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just
Yeah.
blank. Like they just don't acknowledge it. And it's just like, man, you're I don't think I can have you in my life anymore. Like, you're a lost cause, and I hate viewing it that way. I really do. I think everybody to some degree is, capable of growth, but man, some people, it's just, they don't want to help themselves. And if they don't want it, like, I don't think there's anything you can really do about it.
Yeah, I agree. And being around them kind of lowers your energy too, like your vibe,
Yeah.
because so that's the thing is that, I mean, sometimes we don't have a choice because they're in our family. But
Yeah.
it's very important to protect your energy field when you're doing this work too. So that's why, making sure that, if you do have people in your life that you feel are stuck, it's important to have, seek people that are also on this journey so that, like you have like-minded people that you can have those kind of conversations about how can we grow, how can we learn, how can we, feel better, and how can we improve our habits and instead of people who are just, like you said, in the negative feedback loops. And they just keep rehashing the same thing over and over again and not making the connection that, hey, I'm responsible. It's not that person's fault or whatever the situation is. And I have people like that too. It's not stepping back and seeing how am I contributing to what's going on in my life. It's saying, I hate this, I hate that, this is happening, this is happening. And it's not sitting back and saying, well, maybe I'm, my energy is attracting this into my life. And I need to sit back and see, how I've contributed to what's going on and how I'm feeling.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's an insidious thing. You meet people and they're really sweet, they're very kind, they're very gentle, very sensitive. That's probably a good way. Um, but they continue to attract these really toxic people.
Mm-hmm.
And there comes a point where, um, even though I think it comes like they mean well, they continue to kind of blame these other external people. And in a lot of ways, they're kind of, they like telling themselves the narrative that they are a victim. So instead of realizing that they are the person that is accepting these toxic people in their life, I'm not talking about people that grow up with parents or something. I'm saying you're older and you're willingly attracting and accepting these people in your life. There comes a point in time, I feel like, where it's just like, that's on you.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
blame these other people. I think it's oh God, who is it? Um, Names escaped me, but there's a philosopher, and he basically was talking about how you you can't fault somebody for just being themselves. Like, what you're mad at is not them. You are mad at the idea of them because they are just being them.
Mm-hmm.
It could be not good, it could be toxic, but they are just being themselves. And you are having a problem with the reality, so you are not accepting reality, and you're not accepting them for who they are.
Right.
Doesn't mean that
Yeah.
you accept it, but I think people, like, they hold on to that anger and they feel like it's justified, but really all you're doing is just um, causing more friction, and you're not. I think that really comes down to it, is like why so many people stay in toxic relationships. because they're not accepting that person for who they actually are, which
Right.
means it's probably just not a good fit.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that was my history, and then I would, attract people that were equally, confused and lost like I was.
Yeah.
And then it was toxic, it wasn't healthy. And all my, wounds of my childhood would come out. And that's what happens when you get into a relationship, right? Because, the honeymoon phase finishes and then the real life starts. And that's when the real person comes out too. And so, my sense of not feeling loved and, accepted for who I was, that would all come out in relationships. And so, it would be that the guy would just, I've become very needy, very much wanting their attention all the time, just really needy. And they would just say, "Oh my gosh, she's become, what happened to this sweet person that I first met?" And it was just, now she's crazy. And they would leave. And so instead of doing that introspection of like, why am I attracting people like this into my life? Like, what is it saying about myself? I would blame them and be like, oh,
Mm,
like, look at what an asshole he is. And, he left me. It was never that I sat back and did that introspection and said, what is going on with me that I keep picking guys who are, I mean, they weren't really available. They had lots of other, interests. And so I was just kind of on the back burner. And instead of seeing that I'm attracting that because of the way I feel about myself, I just kept blaming them.
yeah.
And so that was a pattern that I got into. And fortunately, like, what a blessing that I was able to just, say, hey, wait a minute here. This is about all these things that I've had, that I went through as a child, like all these wounds, like I haven't even scratched the surface. Cause I thought I got my doctorate. I got my master's in counseling first and doctorate. I thought I was, healing. And through that, through what I was learning, and I was seeing therapists, and I thought, but even if you don't present in this way in therapy, you can still play the victim, in the sense that you can meet a therapist that's just like, oh yeah, you're not meeting the right guys. You were right to leave, and they're the problem. And you're such a good, you can get into a therapy situation like that. So you have to be really ready to really work on yourself and to really look in the mirror and say, I don't feel good about myself, and therefore I'm attracting what's coming into my life.
Hmm. Do you
So
do you think that neediness, if you will, that you had was because you were attracting people that were emotionally unavailable, and you were looking for that validation, so that like you were so um, you could basically almost like you wanted to be so good that they would focus all this attention on you in spite of them having all these other things. Like, do you think that was a part of it at all?
yeah, well, from the way I mean, I guess I haven't thought of it that way, but for me, it just felt like because I did feel um good enough, or I always felt like I didn't match up to what my mom wanted me to be.
Yeah.
And so the way that I looked at it was that I picked people from that fame, from that sort of belief about myself. So I picked people who um did have other priorities, and did, I was attracted to people who continue that feeling that I already had within myself, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Because I had other guys who, would dote on me and give me a lot of attention. And that was just gross to me. Like, I wasn't
Hmm.
comfortable with that at all. And what I was comfortable with is with men who, had 20 million friends and, were really busy at their job. And, I was sort of last priority. That's what I was attracted to. And I think it's, for me, it stemmed from just the way that I felt about myself, that I wasn't good enough and I didn't deserve somebody who would give me their full attention.
Mm, gotcha.
Yeah, at least that's from, and that still comes up for me. That's still very much present in me. So I have to, I constantly have to check on that, the kind of people that are in my life. And, um, you know, I feel like I'm drawn to people who are super busy and have a lot of priorities. And I'm, that feeling of neediness comes back again. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm very comfortable with.
What benefit does that give you to find people that are emotionally unavailable?
I think it just keeps me in my comfort zone. It's what I'm comfortable with. I mean, I'm comfortable feeling needy. I mean, as
Yeah.
gross as that sounds to me to say, it's that I feel that's my comfort zone. I've felt like that my whole life. That wanting people to give me attention, give me attention, tell me that I'm okay. That's what I am comfortable with.
Yeah.
So actually feeling like an equal in a relationship and is not where I feel comfortable, or that that people actually do want to spend time with me. Like that doesn't, or are going to be emotionally available to me. That doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah. See, I'm kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. Is like I've always been the kind of emotionally unavailable one,
Mm-hmm.
which is odd because I'm always like, well, I'd say in the last 5 years at least, like I'm always very blunt and honest with what I'm feeling. But like I'm very aromantic. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not a romantic person, and so like I get very logical when it comes to like relationships, even though I'm highly emotional.
Yeah.
I'm very emotional, but I think that's just comes from trauma, and I think it comes from like safety. So like whenever I feel vulnerable, uh, it's different being vulnerable in like a conversation like this because it's
Yeah.
basically just facts. It's just
Right.
facts. We're just sharing information, but truly actually letting somebody in, that is like having a knife to your throat. It's very different. And like you have to trust that that person isn't going to slit your throat and take your stuff. It's
Yeah.
very
Oh,
hunter
sure.
gatherer, very, very
Yeah.
survival mindset.
Yeah.
And so, I think I've always been attracted to people, if I'm been the leader, I've always been attracted to people that are more followers. And because that gives me power, because
Mhm.
not that I think it as power, it gives me security.
Security. Yeah. That
Yeah, I
makes
wouldn't put
sense.
it as
Yeah.
power. I've never really been the manipulative type in that degree, but um yeah, I don't know. And I've always kind of desired like a equal partnership, but it never usually manifested. A couple times it did, but
Mhm.
that was kind of short-lived for and so yeah, I mean it's difficult. I mean, now my current relationship, it's completely different, which is what makes it so refreshing, but it's just I don't know, it's so odd how in a lot of ways like we just self-reinforce all these negative things and we don't realize how we're hurting ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's so true. It's just it's really incredible to realize how much we stay in our comfort zone. Like you said, even when it's not serving us,
Yeah.
even when we know that it continues to make us suffer. But this pull to just stay the same is so strong in us. I mean, it's biological. I mean, it's how we survived as human beings. Is to stay in homeostasis,
Yeah.
and any kind of change it gets us into that fight or flight, and we don't want to do it, and
Yeah.
so that's what, and especially nowadays when we're just so um, disconnected in the sense that we're just going and going and going, and we're plugged into all sorts of devices. It's even more so that we don't make these connections that
Mhm.
and we don't help ourselves that change is actually good for us, change is necessary for us, because it's like you said, that's a really good that you feel like you're at a knife cut right through your throat. That's what it
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's odd. I mean, it manifests. I had a realization lately that it's very difficult for me to accept, I guess, emotionally. Logically, not. It made perfect sense, but um, I've probably cried like less than a handful, like a handful of times in the last like 5, 6 years. I just don't do it often, but like a couple weeks ago, I had this realization talking with my partner that like I don't think I've ever felt safe in my entire life,
Mm,
not once.
mhm.
I don't feel safe at all. Like
Interesting.
even the second, like I have to have a noise machine going at night,
Mm,
very loud, or like a
mhm,
fan going or something,
mhm.
because if I hear the smallest things, like my fight or flight, I'm like, what the hell is that? Somebody breaking
Yeah.
in? Like we live in an extremely safe area. Like
Yeah.
literally,
Okay.
if you look on a map of the area, it is the safest because the main police station for the city is right down at the end of the street.
Mm.
There are cops that go about once every 50, right, like every 15 to 30 minutes. There's at least one or two cops that go down the street. I mean, you would have to be a complete idiot to try and break into a house around here. And I don't actually know that. Um, Yet there's still like that fear,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's completely not logic based. Um, And that's the thing, is just like feeling hostage to your kind of physiological responses,
Yeah.
your limbic system, your fight or flight, and
Yeah.
it's just so frustrating. So it's just like, yeah, I had that realization, like, I don't ever feel safe. And
Yeah.
then I started unpacking that, and it's like so much makes sense. And I didn't really have any new realizations. What it was tethering together and linking all of
Yeah.
these independent threads that I didn't even know were interconnected.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's the thing over the next 5-10 years I need to work on.
Yeah.
That's the source of everything. And
Yeah. That's
it's very difficult to kind of to process, because I'm just like, God damn, like it's
yeah.
sad in a way, because
Yeah.
there's other people that I know, they don't feel that at all.
Yeah.
You know, like there's other people and they're just like, oh, I feel safe most of the time. And I think about that. Like there's people that I know that grew up like upper middle class
Mhm.
or lower upper class, wherever that barrier distinction is. And they go out, they have a great job, they make a lot of money, they drive nice cars, they can go out in public and just get drunk, and just they have no care in the world that like someone could hurt them or they could make a bad decision. And they have this feeling of like, oh, if I get pulled over, whatever, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I drive a nice car, I'm a white dude, I worst case scenario, I call my lawyer. Like
Yeah.
they have no fear
Right.
at all. They're
Yeah.
basically bulletproof,
Yeah.
and so I'm just like, God, that is not. I'm always looking at like, where's the exit, where's the door,
Mm.
at all times, and that manifests in different ways, and
Yeah.
it's I don't know. I always wonder how many other people feel that way.
Yeah. Well, my husband does. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's how he is. And this way of, uh, sort of, and it's a sense that like he has to control everything, because if he doesn't, then things are going to fall apart. Like because he doesn't. It's not this trusting environment. It's that I have to be in control, and I have to know. It's like you too. That I have to know where the exits are. I have to know. It's always planning for something bad happening.
yeah, yeah,
At least that's where his mind is, and I think it's also with his childhood plays a lot in it, is that he had to survive, and
yeah,
that's kind of how my mom is too. It's that we can't just be in the moment and trust that things will unfold the way that they're meant to. We have to be in control, otherwise bad things will happen. And so it's this fear based too. But I
yeah,
think for you at least, you're making those connections from where it's coming from and what you need to work on. Um, and that I think is a true blessing, because some people just think they don't have an experience that teaches them that we really are out of control. Like there's, at least for my belief, there's something higher that's sort of, um, I guess, in if for lack of a better words, in charge, and and sort of guiding us, and that faith in that is feels very threatening to some people, because and then they're not seeing that they're in control.
yeah.
And that's
I
so,
go ahead.
yeah, no, I was gonna say that's with my husband, that's just so foreign to him. That's like I can't let go, because something bad will happen.
Yeah, and it's been interesting for me to kind of steep on what that means for me. I mean, I'm someone who doesn't really believe in free will, in the essence
Yeah.
that, everything is just causality.
Mhm.
For example, you didn't ask to be born to your parents. You didn't ask to be born in the place that you did. All these things are happening to you. And it's like, you are very much so, like you said, a product of, environment. And also, the genetics play a factor for sure. But then, a lot of times your environment reinforces the genetics or causes you to suppress your genetics, and it causes, if perhaps you just naturally are more sensitive, and you are more, less, um, I guess, self-preservation, like selfish or something, like
Mhm.
there's a lot of things there, but um, eh, and then that calcifies, but it's like, for me, I've been looking at it as, you know, if you don't really have agency in that regard, but I've been trying to create agency.
Yeah.
Whether there is a God or a higher power that is kind of orchestrating things, or whether the God is just causality, it's the
Yeah.
same end result. You don't
Exactly.
have control.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I for me, I just realized that, like, I've been, I grew up in a small business. My dad had a tree service, and feast and famine, particularly in the tree industry, because you are subject to the weather,
Yeah.
and you're subject to things, and there's so many things, and there was severe feast and famine sometimes. And then I've only had one actual job, and that was for like less than 6 months. I've always been on my own. I've always been freelancing. I've always had a business. I've always
Yeah.
been an independent person. Um, so I've that feast and famine, and also with my relationships, often several of them, like my first one that I mentioned, very, very traumatic. So I have always kind of been in this kind of feast and famine, hunter gatherer kind of, like, as far as like, uh, as much of a hunter gatherer as you can be in a capitalist society,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I'm just used to, at all times, like, the rug being pulled out from under me, and
Right.
it's, so even if I think I was predispositioned to that in my childhood, but my entire life has just been calcifying that.
Hmm.
Man, it's a son of a bitch to try and reverse
It
that,
is. It is.
so I can identify with your husband.
Yeah. It's and that's the thing. Like you know, I'm from India, like I said, and with Hinduism, it's this idea of reincarnation, and so like you take this birth and this personality is here to exhaust certain things that you've accumulated from your past lives, and so so basically my whole point of this is that I even going on this journey, and you may not get there in this life, but you're sort of, for me, this is what's helpful for me is that I'm trying, I'm trying to, like you said, get rid of all these calcifications, trying to reduce, or like, I just call them as all these sort of layers that we add to ourselves in order to
Yeah,
protect ourselves. Like, so I'm trying my best every day to, sort of wash some of these layers that I've built to protect myself. But I may not get there in this lifetime, but I'm
yeah,
sort of, I'm channeling my soul to, if I have, if I have to take another birth, that I'm going in that direction, that I'll have more of that wisdom. So I guess when I come again, I'll be maybe in a family that supports this. I won't have to, to be too busy fighting and rebelling and all that sort of stuff just to be seen. Like, it'll just be sort of naturally there for me because I've planted those seeds right now. So that's how I try to, at least, I don't know if it's to make myself feel better, um,
hmm
but that's just how I see it. And I just have been reading Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav or Zuka. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he
hmm
has this chapter on karma that's really helpful in seeing that 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 everything that happens to us is because our personality is trying to get refined, and we're trying to get more connected to our soul. So the more we just see things, the more we don't incur more karma, and so that we have to come back and sort of pay back that what we're doing in this. So basically, anything that happens to us, just taking it, accepting it as a way to refine our personality, so that our soul can evolve, and then maybe in our next life it's more easy for us to get to what the purpose of our life is.
yeah. And I think, even if, I'm someone who's fairly agnostic, but I think that there's a lot of benefits to a lot of religions that really, like, that perspective that you have. I think what that does is it removes a lot of, a sense of urgency, or a horizon to run towards. There's no
Mm-hmm.
destination. You're just like,
Right.
hey, with this lifetime, I just need to work on myself and get a little better,
Yeah.
a little freer,
Yeah.
shed some of those layers. You don't have to be like, by the time I'm 80, I'm self-actualized.
Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
that's that, I think that there's a lot of benefit to that. Me,
Yeah.
again, it's like, the big, the word of the year for me, and perhaps the decade, and perhaps even I look back and say my lifetime, I don't know, is surrender.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading. I saw on your site that one of your the recommended books was, the Surrender, or the Untethered Soul by Michael
Yeah.
Singer, and
Yeah.
I've read that. And then, I actually think his second book, The Surrender Experiment, actually has had a much bigger impact on me,
Okay. Okay.
than the Untethered Soul, just because his own life journey and seeing how he implemented it that had a much bigger impact on me. You particularly the fact that here's a dude who's essentially like a monk almost, and he at one point was running $100 million company, and that's insane. He didn't will it; it just happened naturally, and he actually didn't really want it. He
It just
surrendered
came
to
to,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that he was able to maintain that integrity and balance and stillness and emptiness in a lot of ways, in a good way, and not have a longing and just allowing things to happen while having that kind of, what we would say like monetarily or external success, and not allowing that to taint that kind of integrity of himself. God, that is so rare.
Yeah, it
You see a
is.
lot of people that, they are self-actualized, but they have this life of minimalism. And I think that that is extremely impressive. And I think that that is something to be very, um, to see as a true height of human experience. But I feel like to be able to have that and maintain that while still having all this weight, like, God, that is
Yeah.
just next level. And that's
Oh
what really
yeah.
like sold me on it. Like, this is something that's achievable, because when I was younger, even up until recently, like, I would be like, yeah, that's great, but you don't understand my lifestyle. I talk with therapists a lot, and I burned through a lot of therapists because they weren't entrepreneurs, and they didn't understand what it was like, and they didn't understand truly, the amount of stuff that you have to juggle. And it caused a disconnect. And now it's just like, seeing, that's how I've always kind of seen it. Like, okay, you guys are giving me all this advice, and that's great, but you don't actually understand like the amount of the amount of shit that somebody that's is running a business is doing. But then it's just like, no, that guy running a far
I know.
larger business than
Yeah.
me, and
And can,
crushing it.
yeah.
So that just,
And
it really kind of spoke to me, because that he practiced what he preached, and he was able to see that that kind of thing can scale,
yeah.
and that is like next level to me. But
Yeah.
the surrender thing is a huge aspect of it for me that I've been digesting, because I've realized that, there's this analogy of being a surfer and a pilot. A surfer, somebody like a Michael Singer is just a surfer. They're just riding the waves, and they're reacting to things that are coming to them. But being a pilot is like, you have to, this destination in mind, and you have to get there at all costs. And it becomes like this movie almost, and you're the protagonist, and
Yeah.
it's just like, I've realized that that's been me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to get yourself out of it. But I do feel a lot less friction in my life the last month or so, that I've been really kind of steeping on that.
Yeah.
Um,
It is. It's a whole paradigm shift to, to see to take that kind of a life of surrender and allowing things to happen when you've been in that scarcity mode your whole life.
yeah,
It takes may take this lifetime or in another lifetime to really embody that. And that's what I think, that's too, that what I read from the Seed of the Soul, that just because I too is, my whole thing now is, when can I feel this like deep connection with myself? When is it going to happen? Like, how much meditation do I have to do? It's always like, tell me exactly the prescription that I need to do so I can get there. And just really relaxing and saying, okay, you just take it day by day, and enjoy that process, and not the end result. And that is so foreign for me too, because it was always about, what are you going to achieve, what are you going to get out of this, and
yeah,
that's just I think it's just programmed in all of us. And it's how we survive too. So it's a real different way of looking at things, and it's really just taking a deep breath. That's why this awareness is so important, that when you get into that, you can be like, oh, okay, here I go, kind of say, that's just my pattern, forgive yourself, and then choose something different. Choose a different way of looking at it. And that's what it's doing that over and over and over and over and over again.
yeah,
And that's and just being very patient with yourself, because it's been a lifetime of operating in this way. It may take the rest of this life or another life, or what. That's just kind of how I talk to myself.
yeah.
But at least I'm on this path.
It's hard because, Life is not like a video game. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have a scoreboard. So like if
Mm-hmm.
if you were meditating and being mindful and doing, trying to rewire and remove these layers, if it was like a video game, it would be like, oh, your power level's going up or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
or you're making these progress, but you don't
Yeah.
see that.
Mm-mm.
You not only don't, and maybe people externally outside of you can see that, but even then, it's like I have several people in my life that I think are absolutely brilliant. They are absolutely brilliant. Some of the most brilliant people I've ever met. Um, and they have the lowest self-esteem. Like they're just and I'm like, I wish you could see what I could see,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like that happens a lot of times. Even if you're making progress and you're getting better, you don't see that you are. And I think that um, just makes people, um, kind of like they lose themselves.
Yeah.
They lose that momentum and they get very dissatisfied
Yeah.
and disenfranchised with the whole concept of working on themselves, because it just reinforces, oh, this is a lost cause. But it's just like, actually, you're stumbling a little bit, but you can actually walk now.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't
Mm-hmm.
walk before. It's that
Yeah,
whole thing.
exactly.
what
Yeah.
what are the friction points that you've seen that cause people not to follow through the most?
I think it is a big one is just so I think I talked about when I work with people, it's as we get to know each other, they feel comfortable and they feel that trust. It's okay, now how can we add in one commitment that you're going to make to yourself every single day?
Hmm.
And and so in the beginning of everything, I mean, that's why this is why New Year's resolutions are capitalized upon, because we have all this energy in the beginning to that I'm going to do this, and it's exactly that. They don't see a result immediately. They don't, maybe their depressive symptoms don't feel better within that week until the next, so we just want immediate results. We want to feel better now. And I think we just have low distress tolerance. We're not, we're just not biologically programmed to like to feel. I mean, not to, we have to like it, but we're just so prone to like negative feelings. And it's just very, very difficult for us to sit with uncomfortability. And so, any kind of change, again, it's going back to any kind of change, doing something new. If I'm not going to get the result right away, why would I put myself in that situation? Why would I do
Yeah.
that? I'll just stay in my comfort zone. And unless you give me something quick that's going to make me feel better now, I'll try it. It's not working. I'm done. So it's really seeing that these small efforts that we make for ourselves, it we may not feel it, but it does increase our confidence in ourselves that we can make changes and that we can stay consistent and that we can, that we do care enough for ourselves to stay on this path. And that in of itself is the motivation that we need.
Yeah.
That's what we need to look at, that, see, I can do it. And I said I'm going to do this for myself and I did it. And that confidence that it brings in yourself, that, I made a commitment to me, that's what's hopefully supposed to keep us going. And that's what I kind of reframe for people, is that, this is not a, you may not see big changes, but the fact that you're actually saying you're going to do something and you do it is a big deal. And that in of itself is a big change in you, that let's go with that momentum. So, but, not seeing results is what it makes people give up. It makes people give up on therapy, especially because, it's not medication where you can, within 2 weeks you might feel better. It's
Yeah.
it's not that simple.
What where do you think that the both from a psychology and a psychiatry standpoint and the in a medical field, are the biggest issues, and where do you really see it going? Because like I mentioned the Cleveland Clinic, and for more of a physical aspect, the traditional medicine is, I went to a specialist, and they were doing some biopsies and stuff, and then I just mentioned, leaky gut. I'm like, is this, what do you I just said, what is your opinion on this? um and I wasn't proposing anything. I just said, I've
Mm-hmm.
heard this. There seems to be some really credible people that are, world class specialists that are now saying this is a thing, but
Mm-hmm.
traditionally it was kind of known as an alternative thing. I was just like, what's your thoughts on it? And then they got really weird, and they were like, "That's not a thing. It's basically a pseudoscience, and it's alternative holistic medicine, whatever. It's not real." So then I go to the Cleveland Clinic, and they're
And
like,
that's so
"It's
different.
definitely real. We treat it
Yeah.
all the time." And I was just
Yeah.
like, "How is a GI specialist, a respected doctor around here?
Yeah.
How do they not know this is a thing when they
Yeah.
literally are doing biopsies of the intestines? They should be able to see this, right?" And they're like,
Yeah.
I think she said something along the lines of like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the medical community most doctors didn't think the microgut biome was a thing. And they're just like 10, 15 years from now, that doctor will thinks it a little differently. And I think that's like a good example of the medical community, particularly mental health. I think it's even more so, it's just like, it just seems like there's such a paradigm shift occurring,
There
you
is,
know,
yeah.
what do you see?
I mean, I do, I see that there's going to be more of a blend between Eastern and Western sort of thoughts and philosophies, like, that it's not just the mind and it's not just the body, that there's going to be more, that there's a connection that, so um, more more realizations about all this connection between the gut and the brain, and that they're not separate entities, so that one affects the other. And so just how we need not just one field in order to feel better. It's not just, I mean, there's wonderful things about Western medicine, but there's equally wonderful things about Eastern techniques and Eastern medicine as well. So I think just more of an acceptance of blending the two, and less about I'm right and you're wrong, and it's either or. So I think that's where I see. I mean, that's where I think it has to go. Is that there's more coverage for people like seeking acupuncture, and it's covered more by insurance, so that it is accessible for people, that it's not just a sort of a luxury. If you have money and you're able to afford those things, then you can, I think it's going to be that it's part of treatment. So it's becoming like more centers where it is integrative, where there is mental health, where there is yoga and meditation, and those sort of techniques that are part of your treatment plan. Is that that's part of your, and I wouldn't call it treatment plan. I think it's more like your wellness plan. So it's more about wellness rather than a disease model,
Yeah.
where, so it's more like, let's see that we're all these parts of us are connected. And so there's specialists for each one that you can get support with. So for
Yeah.
me, when I meet with people, I look at, how are you taking care of yourself physically? Do you know what foods work for your body? Because we're all different. We all are, come with different needs and different things that work for us. And so have you gone on that journey? Like, do you have any food sensitivities? Do you have any gut issues? Have you done that sort of those testing that to see what foods work for me? Am I allergic to anything? Like all those sort of things that, because especially now our food system that's a whole other topic, but that's very messed up, and we're not
For
eating,
sure.
yeah, to, how we're supposed to be eating. We're not connected to the roots. We're not eating real food. We're eating food that's made in factories.
Yeah.
And of course that's going to affect us. It's going to affect us physically, and it's going to affect us mentally, spiritually, everything. So I think just that it's not just so cut and dry. Like it's not, for me, going in my doctorate program, we got the statistical manual, and yes, I can diagnose somebody, but we don't fit into a box like that.
Yeah.
I don't just see that, okay, you have this, you have this, you have this, check, you have depression. It's just not that simple. And
Yeah.
and so I think there's more realization that we need comprehensive ways of looking at each individual as an individual, and not try to put them in a box.
Yeah. There's just so much. It's like there's not really a large incentive to be a proponent of all that. Like if
Mhm.
you look at just follow the money, it's like every
The
single
money, yeah.
thing that you've just described, which I entirely agree with, it completely is at odds with consumerism. Because, it's like, okay, you eat whole foods and that's a simple thing. You grow the food and then you supply it. There's not, you can't patent that, you can't, it's not going through a manufacturer, it's not pre-made or any of that stuff. So there's a lot, instantly um, I think it was like 70% of the grocery store is basically just prepackaged stuff.
Yeah,
So if you
exactly.
remove most of that, that's a lot of industry that's just gone.
Mhm.
You know, if you have people that are meditating and doing yoga and they're also eating better,
Mhm.
then, you know, I would say a significant amount of people probably wouldn't need to be on anti-anxieties or antidepressants.
Mhm.
You know, not everybody, but a lot of people. And then
Yeah.
there's the aspect of, you know, your gut biome, like you were saying. I think it's like what 70% of serotonin is produced in the gut or
Mhm.
something
Mhm.
crazy like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, me, I have severe gut dysbiosis.
Mhm.
I had a stool sample test. It's really bad, and
Mhm.
I'm just starting a treatment plan for it, and that might be the cause of a lot of my autoimmune issues.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that that takes care of a lot of it.
Yeah.
So it's just like how many other people are dealing with that. I mean, there's been all of these case studies of them doing a fecal transplant
Mhm.
in people with in healthy, you know, healthy mental health and physical. They'll do a fecal transplant to someone who is chronically depressed, and often their depression goes significantly reduces with just
Yeah.
that fecal transplant. So it's just like
Yeah.
your gut biome. There's that's kind of where I go with the free agency thing. It's like
Mhm.
we are constantly being influenced by things physiologically, environmentally, where it's like can you do you really have free will in that regard?
Mhm.
And that gives me more empathy for people. You
Yeah.
know, you don't know what they're going through. They might not even know what they're going through.
Right.
And
Right.
then, you know, so I had a pretty severe magnesium deficiency. I
Mhm.
started taking magnesium L-threonate, which crosses the blood-brain barrier, and my anxiety reduced by probably 70% within like
Wow.
hours. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
was placebo, but I've tried it enough where like it just consistently works. And I've
Yeah.
had a couple other people that have severe anxiety, and I've given it to them, and it's helped them a lot. I'd
Mhm.
probably say it's like 2 out of 10 people, maybe, but still, that's insane. That could be a
Yeah.
game changer for people. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
do you have a severe deficiency? You know, a lot of people, I think it's like 50 to 60% of Americans or something like that are deficient in vitamin D.
Vitamin D. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just
Yeah.
like there's just we don't do that. You know,
Yeah.
like
We
the most
don't.
we don't do
Yeah.
blood work. We don't do any of that stuff for the most part. You know, if you're
Right.
lucky to have a doctor that thinks about that, great. But
Mhm. Mhm.
most people that I know that have depression that have gone to their doctor, they don't do any of that.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
seems so obvious. Like, hey, have some blood work done.
I know. I know.
It's
I think it's people just get very territorial in what they do. Um, so I think I mean it's it's a bunch of egos coming around saying my ways, I can fix you and I can fix you. And people want that too. People want to be fixed. And so it's not looking at the broader picture and our food system and just the way we're living our lives and just how disconnected we are from the earth. And all of this has an influence on us. I mean, that's we were out in fields living that way. We were much more connected to the earth, and we don't live like that. We're always in buildings, we're on screens, we're just so disconnected. And so therefore our bodies are too. Like we're not we're deficient on so many things.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it's that's my vision, is that people realize that true wellness is incorporating all of these fields, and it's not just that one is right and the other one is wrong. And one may work for some person and another, it's everybody's different. And so I
yeah.
think it's going to become more individualized wellness plans rather than these broad treatment plans that should work for everybody. So that's my hope. That's where my hope is, where it's going, is that people are actually being seen and heard, and so that they can, you know, wellness plans are developed based on what they're going through and what they
Yeah.
need.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the perspective of like our nature of like looking for a panacea that's like, you know, a cure all, or one size fit all for everything. I mean, I definitely think that that's a paradigm shift that seems to be going in that direction,
Thanks.
and I'm hopeful, because, you know, it's like there's people that I've seen that have severe autoimmune issues and they get on a carnivore diet and they're much better. And I'm like, well, I think that probably is indicative of a couple things, perhaps, and there's probably, you know, gut dysbiosis, something going on there. However, that works for you. That's great.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean everybody should be on a carnivore diet, you know.
exactly.
But then there's
Yeah.
the opposite end of the spectrum, people that are arguing that a carnivore diet's not good for anybody. It's like, well, that
Mhm.
doesn't make sense either. Maybe there are people that it's
Yeah.
good for, you know. So it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It goes to
Yeah.
that kind of tribalism as well. Like that's one of the things I find so interesting about the medical and even the educational field, like with colleges, is the kind of dogmatic nature of a lot of it. And it's just odd. Like you would think educators and medical professionals who are literally in the sciences would think about this in terms, they wouldn't be as dogmatic about it. But some of the doctors that I've known have been some of the most closed-minded people,
Yeah.
and it's really
Yeah.
weird, you
Yeah.
know.
I think it's their training. There's such intense training, and it, I think they're just so trained to think that they have all the answers, and it's just, it's all that, if it's empirically validated, then that's the truth.
Yeah.
And that's their training for so long. And I think it's just intense training, stressful. And so, and I think they're kind of feeling threatened too. It's, because their field is being threatened in some ways. At least that's how they feel, because there's now more of a push for these sort of alternative, people are kind of realizing that, these treatments are just leading to other side effects. They're not really, taking care of their root issue. They're just adding to it, and maybe they get temporary relief, but then they get other symptoms. So I think people are trying to are realizing this more and seeking other things, and the medical field is in general feeling a bit threatened by that.
It's like it's kind of sociopathic though. Like I don't understand as a doctor. I like, I've seen a lot of specialists over the last, 10 years for because these issues I've had have faded in and out. Like I've definitely been having a lot of issues for a while, but I've seen a lot of specialists. A lot of them have been very apathetic. They might be very understanding, but then once they go through and they do all their testing and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with you, they become very apathetic a lot of the
Yeah,
time,
right.
and they're just like, not my problem, not my circus, not my monkeys. Go over here. Now I've had a handful of people that have been like that, like the ENT that I saw, who was he you could tell like he wished he could have done more, and he's like, we've done everything. I am so sorry. I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing evidence of what you're seeing, what you're going through. I see the evidence, but it doesn't seem to be caused by anything in the sinuses or any of this other stuff. He's like, so, and you could tell like he desperately wants to help, and he's giving me recommendations, and he's like doing everything he can. It's like that's a dude who, if he could, he absolutely would do something to help. But a lot of these other doctors, like they just seem the second that they don't think it's relevant to them, they just seem totally dejected and
Yeah.
disinterested. And I'm like, I get that I mean, my sister's a nurse. Like, I get how it can be very demoralizing being in the the medical field, but I just couldn't imagine like having that total, I don't know, just like not having the desire to do everything you can to help people. Like, if I was a specialist and I thought for a second that there was something that could help people, like, I would want to help my patients. Like, that makes no sense to me. And it seems like they're kind of like, instead of going with the flow of progress and staying on top of it and riding that wave and also helping people, which is what they're supposed to be doing, there's that ignoring it, like you're
Yeah.
saying, like just like, oh, not, leaky gut, that's not a thing. It's like, well,
Yeah.
actually there's a
Yeah.
lot of studies that have been done in the last 5 years that indicate it is.
Right. Right.
So that means you're not keeping up with your field, which
Mhm.
leads me to believe, what are you not doing for your patients, your other patients? How are your patients suffering because you're giving them suboptimal treatment?
Right.
Like, it's just, you don't want to, like, it's like the dark side of the medical field right now. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of it's intentional, but it doesn't really have to be malicious. It's still
Yeah.
like this kind of, I don't know, man. It's a weird area, man. I
Yeah.
don't
It
know.
doesn't. I know it doesn't feel good. I mean, it feels.
Oh,
Yeah. I just think that there's so much now that's people are presenting with that's not, that they don't get trained in, or they don't get knowledge about in medical school. It's very, it's very, I mean, just the way that I learned in my PhD program, it was very much by the book.
Yeah.
Here's the statistical diagnosis. These are the symptoms of somebody if they have them for more than 2 weeks and they have major depression. I mean, it was just, and that's how you learn in medical school too. And fortunately, that never felt right for me. And I felt that very deeply, but I needed that degree to get to where I wanted to be. And I think in the medical, some medical doctors just sort of stay stuck. And I think more in medical schools, it's sort of this like God. Um, I mean, they're made to feel like God, that they can fix anything, that they can do anything, that they have this, which it is a noble profession. But I think
Yeah.
it's this idea that they have all the answers, and they can prove everything, and that if they see this, and they can fix it. And I think just now they're presented with a lot of things that they can't fix, and unfortunately they're not willing to think outside the box. I mean, I know some doctors who are now going and getting certifications in integrative medicine, because they felt that stuckness, that I can't help my patients and I need to learn more.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. Like, if you can get to that point where you admit that my training didn't prepare me for all of this, and I need to learn more because I really want to help people. And I was fortunate enough to feel that what I learned, it was a good basis, and I need to get there to get my PhD so that I could do what I wanted to do, but it wasn't enough for me. And
Yeah.
I know I wasn't really serving people. So I wanted more training. I wanted to learn more about nutrition and, mindfulness and all these things that I really feel like people need in order to truly go on a healing journey.
Yeah, for sure. You know, having this like holistic mindset and kind of thinking of like holistic therapy, I understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
I even think about in terms of like me being a marketing professional. I think, I very much so think like holistic marketing because a lot of it's, I don't think it's that dissimilar. A lot of people in marketing, it's very two-dimensional. It's like, okay, well, you're going to do performance marketing. So we're going to do ads, we're going to do this or we're going to do that. Everyone has kind of like, um, they have their toolkit and they use those tools and everything else is kind of bullshit or like
Mm-hmm.
secondary or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Me, I'm looking, how can all these things work in tandem? How can they all be unified? How can they benefit each other? And it's like a force multiplier. And I look at that in everything in life, and to me, what you're doing is exactly the same thing in your field.
Mm-hmm.
But I think particularly when it comes to mental health, you hear the term holistic, and people start equating that with like crystals and crap, and
Yeah.
it's how have you gotten pushback on that, or how do you deal with that? Because this is a field that I most definitely think is going to continue to gain traction and respect. It's not dissimilar at all to psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
It was a due to the asshole that was Nixon and everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
it got that all that progress got stunted, and it was looked at as this kind of dirty thing in the medical
Mm-hmm.
community. And now we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing thankfully that all this research being done, John Hopkins and everything else, that like this is helping people in a significant way. So now it's finally in the last couple of years starting to gain that respect. At least people aren't openly dismissing it like they used to.
Right.
They
Right.
might not like it, but they're a little more neutral. And I see the exact same thing happening in real time. I mean, the fact
Yeah.
that like the Cleveland Clinic has a functional medicine department and all this
Right.
other
Right.
stuff that, I see the functional medicine being the equivalent in in that field. And so it's just like, I see this, us realizing there's so many layers, but also there's a lot of pushback, I'm sure. How have you
Yeah.
had to deal with that? Like, how have you had to personally cope with maybe people having a total misunderstanding of what you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been the biggest challenge for me, because again, it's triggered a lot of my own stuff in terms of wanting to feel accepted,
Yeah.
and so that's been very much part of this whole journey, which I think I needed to, which is why I resisted even opening my own, based on what I believe in. It's because I knew I was going to feel this sort of, especially within my family, and even my husband, he's a medical doctor and he's very much by the books, so he doesn't understand a lot of what I believe in. He's like, unless I can see it in some study, I don't believe it.
Huh.
So it's, but in that sense, it's been good for me because it's taught me how to um, stay true to what I believe in, even if other people don't see it the way that I do. So for my own personal growth, that this has been really good. It's not comfortable for me, and I wish that my husband and I were sort of think on the same level on these sort of things, but he's very like Western medicine is the way. And he's also in anesthesiology, so he's very procedural. So he
Mm.
just has to go in there, put the person to sleep, he's done. He doesn't deal with these sort of, inflammatory diseases that people have now. He doesn't have to follow people like that. So
Yeah.
he hasn't got to that frustration where the tools that I've learned in medical school aren't helping me. He gets pure satisfaction from putting somebody to sleep. They wake up, they're like, "Oh, thanks, doc. I had no pain."
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
like, "That was my purpose. I'm done."
Yeah.
Whereas and for me, it's ongoing relationships, and I see that what I learned is not helpful. I mean, it's not that it's not helpful, but it's just scratching the surface. It's not getting to what people really want, which is to, why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I get into these patterns? And that's what I've. So my struggle with that and not being able to help people drew me into other directions, into these sort of holistic practices. Um, so so getting back to your question, I think it's just been more practicing myself, believing in um, my own beliefs about health and wellness, so that I can stand up for myself and what I believe in and my practice and what I'm trying to do, and not revert back to what is easier, which is to join a practice and just do the same, or go back to the hospital setting and do what I was doing. And I have those days where I'm just like, this is too hard. I don't even know how to talk about this with people. I don't know how to put myself out there. What if people don't accept me? Let me just go back to what's comfortable for me. And
Yeah.
that's a daily thing that I go through.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
I, I feel like you did. It's just
Yeah,
it's a struggle, but you feel like this is the way that you can help people the most, and you have to
yeah,
persevere. You
yeah.
know,
And
I
that's
mean,
that's yeah, like hanging on to that why am I doing this? And so yeah, that I truly want to help people. I don't want to just scratch the surface for people. I really want to help people, and I really want to be part of that journey with them. And
what's that like having a partner that doesn't quite understand what you do?
yeah, it's challenging. It's difficult. It's we're just very uh, we're wired very differently. And like I said, he's in this sort of scarcity model. He feel or mindset that he has to control things, that he's in control, and this idea of letting go and surrendering, it's so foreign to him. And it's not even a concept that he and I really blame it. I do blame it on medical school, because once upon a time he was the person that sold all his possessions and got a one-way ticket to London, and then hitchhiked his way to India and was in an ashram meditating. And
Huh.
so he
Interesting.
has this,
Yeah.
and that's the side that I was most intrigued with. And and the medical side is honestly what, um for the stability, which is what I knew my parents wanted. They wanted that stability. The MD was that, okay, there'll be a paycheck at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But what I was intrigued with my husband is this other side of him that he's sort of lost touch with. Like, at least from my perspective, he's lost touch with, because he's gotten to this very practical. I have a family now. I have to provide for them. I have to do these things. I can't even be in touch with that other side of me. So, but I also think that he, was, married me and was attracted to me because I do bring out that, sort of that side that's not so practical all the time,
Yeah.
that's more adventurous and free, and let's just live life and see what happens. Like, I have that much, very much inside me. And so I know that's why but it's been this push and pull between us, because he's like, no, I'm responsible now. I've got a family. I have to, I have to bring a paycheck. I can't even think about all that stuff.
Yeah. What's that like? Like being, I mean, God, like I understand. What's that like being not so much in my current relationship, I guess, but like historically, I'm a problem solver. You know, I'm pretty much a therapist for everybody in my life. And like part of that comes from, you know, trauma, like just trying to remove the possibility of conflict and everything else. So I get, you know, fight, flight, or freeze. I kind of freeze and then I get really clinical. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what you need to do to fix this problem. And so you know, my reaction is just to get very, this is what we need to do. That has caused some conflict in my life because people are just like, dude, I don't need you to problem solve this. I just
Yeah.
want to vent to my friend.
Right.
And I have a really hard time doing that. I have a hard time just listening and not doing anything. I actually thought about being a therapist at one point, and I'm like, that's going to be hard for me because I'm just going to be
Telling them
do
what to
do
do.
this,
Yeah.
this, and this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't just listen and be quiet.
Right.
I
Right.
can to a degree, but after a while, like I just get frustrated. And if if someone's on that, if somebody needs that and they want that, man, I'm fucking perfect. But if they don't, which a lot of the time they don't, it gets issues. It gets problematic. So like, what is that like though? Being a therapist with your profession being helping people process and like grow, and having a partner that you feel like um not speaking ill or anything, but just like seeing these, you know, there seems to be a conflict there. Like they used to be this way, but now they're this way, and that's gotta kind of, I don't know, it would eat at me. I would just be like, uh, is that actually you? Like,
Yeah.
are you suppressing something? Like,
Yeah.
but anyway, why I'm not trying to dig into that part. It's just more so like, how do you put governors? How have you had to deal with that? Because for me, I would just look at this as like I would constantly be wanting to problem solve in my own relationship.
I was, and I mean, I still do to some degree, but I've, that's, he's taught me a lot about myself too. I mean, this relationship is the first relationship that, even though my craziness came out in the sense of, I don't mean to, label it as crazy because I don't like that word, but it's,
Sure.
my insecurities and the wounds that would like that got triggered a lot with him too, because he's also busy doctor, busy, busy, busy. His mind's always going. He's just um, and he's also the type of person that likes a lot of alone time. So a lot of my wounds, but this is also the person that did leave because of all the
Mhm.
stuff that came up. Like he still stayed. And so he's really taught me to check in with myself and see where this is coming from. So his behavior still does. I mean, the fact that he doesn't buy into what I believe in triggers this, like, I'm not important enough for him to appreciate what I believe in,
Yeah.
And so it's really helped me to see that it's not about me. It's where he's at in his life. It's not because he doesn't care for me or love me, and it's not that he doesn't even respect what I believe in. It's just that he's not where he's in his life. He's not willing to go there. And for whatever reasons, he's just sort of put the blinders on, and he's just in survival mode, that I have to take care of my family. I can't even look outside, but because I think that if he did, he feels like he would just run away. He would just take
Wow.
off. And
Yeah.
so I think he's the type of guy that should probably be living in Montana with like acres of land with nobody around him. That's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
his that's his thing. And I think that if he actually tapped into that, he would run. And but he's also, he comes from a childhood where his dad left him. So he's very much like, I'm not going to be like my dad. So he is in this, like, I got to stay here, because if I even tap into that, I could run, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to do that. So I've learned to appreciate that part of it. I mean, there's still this, like, I wish, because it doesn't have to be that extreme. Um, but it's less that I take it personally, that it's about me. And
Yeah.
that's a huge learning thing for me, because I take I mean, I'm very like self-centered in that way. And then I'm very sensitive to people's behaviors. And so if they do something, I'm like, I did something wrong. It's
Mm.
because of me. I'm not lovable. I'm not that, it just goes right back to me. And I've learned, being with him for as long as I have, that it's not about me. It's just where he's at in his life.
Yeah.
And I have to surrender, just like we talked about. I have to surrender. And I just do a lot of praying for him. And that's what I've, and I'm not perfect at it. I get angry, and all that stuff still, I'm a human being, it happens, but
Yeah.
I'm much more able to just say, this is where he's at in his life, and I have to just do me. I can't change anybody. I can't make him see things differently. That's on him.
Yeah. It's how do you, being such an empath and then also having those kind of triggers yourself,
Mhm.
how do you cope with that being a therapist where you have a lot of emotional weight I'm sure you deal with every day?
Mhm.
I mean, I can understand. I've got like I said, I'm kind of a therapist to a lot of people in my life, so that I'm usually first response when people are going through things, particularly if it's really traumatic. If it's subtle, there's other friends that are probably just, hey, hey, I want to bitch for a while. I'm not the good person for that, but I deal with a lot, and with clients often I'm a consultant and I'm hearing all their problems, and it's a lot, but I also don't deal with that every day.
Yeah, yeah,
So like what is that like? Like how do you keep yourself grounded?
yeah.
Particularly someone with you who's kind of predispositioned to having that feeling like you're not enough or you didn't do a good enough job or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I think this is what also wanted me to learn more about holistic healing practices and a holistic way of looking at mental health, is because it really does give the ownership back to the person that I'm working with, and it puts it not that it doesn't give me less responsibility, but I don't see myself as the person that's going to fix what they're going through. I can truly just sit back and listen and observe. And that's been super helpful for me, to create that observing attitude rather than getting so engulfed in what they're in their stories. Really truly seeing them as this sort of divine individual that has the answers, that if I just sit back and provide that space for them, that they will get to that point. And so that's been really helpful for me to um, work with people, but then not take it upon myself that I need to fix them. I need to fix them. If they're not feeling better tomorrow, then I'm doing a bad job.
Yeah.
And so that's been really, 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 I feel like I've gotten more tools because of going in this direction. I feel less pressure when I first meet a person, that I'm going to do something to fix them. It's totally changed the way that I've been able to work with people, which has been so helpful for me, and put taken off so much of the pressure off myself too.
Yeah, I'm sure. What what do you do when you do feel overwhelmed at this point?
So yeah, I mean that's I do, because I am seeing clients, and then I also have two little kids, and so it's
That's a
many
lot.
hats. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm I have a coach, and I also have a therapist. So just have a lot of um help, I guess, or support in my life, because I know that I need that. And I try to stay true to my meditation practice, and I try to stay true to making sure that I'm eating in the way that fuels me, and nourishes me. And so I really try to stick to my, being regular with those things. Now, I'm not perfect at it. I definitely have times where I'm just like, I'm too tired. I can't do this. But then I'm much more able to pick myself up and know that I need these things, and so that I can, so that I can fulfill all these roles. And I also need, that at night when everybody goes to sleep, I take that time to be quiet. I need a lot of quiet time for myself. Right now there's a lot of noise. My husband is a kind of a noisy person too. Like he works better in chaos, and I work better when it's nice and calm. And so
Yeah.
I take that quiet time, and I make sure that I read for at least 30 minutes, and I pay attention to how much time I'm on my phone. Um, I take breaks from social media, all those things that I know. I mean, I've learned myself pretty well now, and I know what
Yeah.
works for me, and I know what doesn't work for me. And I fall off the wagon all the time, but I know what I need to do to get myself back on. And that's very empowering for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How has all this kind of colored or influenced your worldview?
Maybe can you? elaborate on that?
Just like I guess for me, like the older I get and the more these layers of awareness, I guess, that I have, particularly like just diving into all these different things, like talking with professionals like you with vastly different perspectives on the world, doing my own research in certain areas, scratching my own itch, but also just being an observer with um, a lot more layers of understanding how the world works. Increasingly, it's made me simultaneously more optimistic and more pessimistic in various degrees. It has made me more empathetic and also at the same time more frustrated with people. Um, it is something that I go back and forth if I'm a pessimistic optimist or an optimistic pessimist, and it's something that I wrestle with a lot. And marketing as a whole and understanding psychology and buyer psychology. Like the last conversation I had was with Rishi Rawat, and he's someone who literally specializes in buyer psychology, and like knowing how like that influences. Okay, how does this influence a shopper buying a product? But then how is that gamified and hacked by institutions and everything else? It's just like having this deep awareness of how the world kind of works increasingly. Most people, I feel like, have a very two-dimensional understanding of how the world works. They don't see all these layers. And someone as yourself who specializes in subtleties, specializes in understanding the subterranean space of the inner machinations of people's minds, like understanding all of that and seeing it every day and realizing all around you that everything in society is completely optimized in things that are not in our best interest. I mean, I have to imagine that's a heavy weight.
Yeah, I think it's optimistic that I feeling of optimism and hope that that like sort of going into this new direction where I'm opening my new practice uh, and trying to help people in the way that I feel they truly need help is the optimistic side of me, that there is this sort of avenue of for this to actually blossom, and people that want this type of therapy in their life, and they want this type of help in their life, and they want this type of support in their life. But yeah, that's when you turn on the news and you see all that's going on, and all the hatred and the anger and just all the layers of hypocrisy and just me mentality. It's very disheartening, and so, not that I try to not know what's going on in the world, but I really try to limit how much I um spend my time seeing all the just listening to news and what's going on in the world, and particularly now with this pandemic and everything that's happening. I really try to stay you know, true to what I believe in, which is that people are basically good. At the heart of us, we're all good. We're just all in pain, and we're just
Yeah.
all going through so much trauma. And, little me over here I'm just trying to do what I can to help people with all this trauma that we're experiencing, all this collective trauma, generational trauma. Like, there's just so much trauma, and people are just lost and confused, and they're just trying to survive. And that's why there's, you know, I mean, with that, when we're in pain, we hurt other people. And that's what we're doing. We're in pain. And so we're hurting others. We're hurting the environment. We're hurting, our loved ones. We're hurting everybody because we're in so much pain. And so whatever I can do to, help people in their pain and support people in their pain is all I can do. And I just try to stay in that space, because the other bit just makes me feel helpless and hopeless.
Yeah. It's
you
hard,
know?
man. I think we
Yeah,
have a
it's
long way
hard.
ahead, but I think we as a species have gone through like quite a lot of crazy shifts and turns, and
Mhm.
I something that makes me optimistic is thinking about being able to things like Neuralink and stuff like that, where we can actually kind of adjust our nature in a little bit. And I think once we have a better understanding, like if you could just interface with somebody and have an understanding of where they're coming from, I don't know. The evolution of the internet as well, I think will continue. I think this Gen Z is like the first generation to truly grow up on the platform of the internet as it is. And I think that they seem to me to be a lot more skeptical of, like on Reddit, one of the top subreddits that's trending is anti-work. It's just people that are just kind
Yeah.
of over capitalism and all this other
Yeah.
crap. And they're like,
Yeah.
this shit is like neo-feudalism. This doesn't work for me anymore. I'm not a socialist or a communist or a capitalist or anything. I don't really know
Yeah.
where I sit in it because I see good aspects and bad aspects of pretty much all the financial frameworks. But still, it's like it seems like people are waking up,
Yeah.
particularly the
That's what it
younger
says.
generation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's what I feel too, that they're overall these, um, just they're just all this that's going on, like the capitalism, and I think they're seeing things a lot differently than the older generation. So
Yeah.
that's what that does make me feel hope. But there's a lot, and there's still, there's just a lot of collective trauma as a result of this sort of consumerism and this sort of individualistic kind of society that we've lived in. There's just a lot of trauma that's resulted from that. So lots of healing needs to be done. But I do think the younger generation does see that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's
Yeah.
a good part to land on before we
Okay.
veer too much into the pessimistic again, which
I know.
I feel like if we with me it always does that. So I like this
Yeah.
kind of optimistic note.
Okay.
Is there anything that you want to say in closing, or how can people reach you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you very much for having me
Thanks for being on, man.
on your podcast. Yeah, I appreciate it. So my website is www.inaratherapy.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Inara Therapy and Wellness. So you can find me at both those places. And if, my website, if you go on, I provide free resources. So for, I think it's 6 weeks, you'll get some um, sort of self-care tips from me. So things you can read and kind of implement in the moment after you read them. So, and then you'll also be on my email subscriber list. So I send out some, just thoughts I'm having that you'll receive too. So, but there's lots of resources on my website itself. So that's where you can find me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just throw this out there. I think you should start a podcast.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, I think you should.
Really, okay. Yeah. I've been thinking about it. That's the next thing is that, that's kind of out of my comfort zone. Cause like I appreciate like you know how to ask questions, and in my mind, just getting stuck in my mind thinking, what am I even going to ask? What am I going to talk about? What topics am I going to bring up? Yeah.
But how do you do that with your clients?
Yeah, that somehow it feels very different than it does
It's
in
the
a
same.
podcast. Yeah,
It's the
I
same.
guess. Yeah. So
It's just a microphone. That's it.
right,
I've
right.
had to learn that for myself because
Really.
I've had some people be like, "Oh, you're really good at this," and you've only been doing it 6 months. I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for most of my life.
Oh yeah.
I in one way, shape, or form. Like I've been, doing, sales meetings and creative meetings where the whole thing is extracting the why out of why somebody started a business, why are they doing what they do. But really, I think you're really good at it. I think you
Oh,
you
thank
you already are a naturally like very intuitive person. So I think it's just shedding that, just going with the flow and being like, there's no set agenda.
yeah.
I'm just having a conversation with somebody, and all we're doing is that the person that's listening is a fly on the wall. I do have to think about it every once in a while. Like I do have to think about like, okay, what direction am I steering this in? There's a little bit, but I think the same thing is when you're a consultant or a therapist. It's the same thing. You're still
Yeah.
sitting there thinking like, how am I steering this? What leading questions am I doing? I think you already have the toolkit for all the heavy lifting. So I think you should do
Well,
it.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's been on my mind. And actually, my husband keeps saying, just start a podcast. You can start a
Dude,
podcast. And
I will hook you up with everything you need to know.
oh,
Everything.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll jump on a
Yeah.
call after this. I'll tell you everything you
Okay.
need to know, all the setup,
Okay.
everything. I spent a lot of time
I'm sure you
doing
did
research.
because
So
it does seem like you've been doing this for a long time.
yeah,
I couldn't tell that it's only been 6 months for you. You just seem it just flows for you. So, and you make people feel very comfortable. At least I felt very comfortable. So,
well, that's great to hear. I think you
yeah.
will as well. So we'll talk about it offline. Thank you so
Okay.
much. This has been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you very much.